All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join SQFI for our Learning Lunch webinar. My name is Leslie Jones. I'm a marketing specialist at SQFI, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Now, today's discussion on preparing for Level 3 certification is going to be presented by Gary Smith, who is the Director of Food Safety Services at Eurofins, and today's event is also going to be sponsored by Eurofins. Now, before we get started with today's presentation, there's a little, I just want to take a moment to go over some basic webinar protocol. First, I would like to remind everyone that this webinar will be recorded. It generally takes me about 2 business days to process the recording, but you should find it up on our YouTube channel and also the events page of the SQFI website in 2 business days. So we're going to be looking at Monday, September 19th. Second, if you have any questions for Gary during his presentation, please feel free to just write those into either the chat or the Q&A box that you'll see is located on the right-hand side of your screen. While he's giving his presentation, I'll be paying attention to those boxes, and I will copy over those questions to him. And then once he concludes the presentation, we'll get into the Q&A portion. Now, before we get started with the actual presentation, I would like to take a couple minutes just to go through some updates for SQFI and go over some available training classes and just kind of give you a brief overview of some of our events. Now, the first resource that I'd like to point your attention to is our FSMA resource page. The rules and implementation of FSMA have been on everyone's mind this year, and we know that sorting through the FSMA final rules can be a time-consuming and sometimes a confusing task. And as such, we've put together this FSMA resource page that is designed to help you understand the legal and the regulatory complexities of FSMA, and also to help alleviate some of the pain points that you might experience or be struggling with regarding the implementation and the execution. So if you look on the screen, this is just a screenshot of our homepage, and this button that you see in the center, it's a bright yellow picture that says, "Are you FSMA ready?" And that is the location of our FSMA resource page. And in addition to the 2 FSMA comparisons that we had the admin group conduct for SQF, one is a comparison of the preventative controls for human food, and that's compared to SQF Level 2 certification. The second one was a comparison of produce safety to SQF Level 2. And in addition to this, we are excited to announce that we have recently released our voluntary preventative controls audit checklist and corresponding guidance document. Now, these documents are intended for stakeholders to use as a guide so that they're able to identify the necessary steps that they'll need to take in order to bridge any gaps between a company's SQF program and the PC rule. It is important to note, however, that using these documents does not guarantee compliance, and it also does not absolve a supplier from ensuring that they meet all aspects of FSMA. It's more meant to be a voluntary checklist that just helps you understand where exactly you stand, and it's not officially scored like the SQF audit. However, this is a very valuable tool that will help you understand and identify any gaps between your program and the PC rule. And to help explain everything that I just talked about, we're actually going to be having a webinar later on this month given by our Senior Technical Director, Leanne Chuboff, and this is going to be held on September 27th. And if you're interested in signing up, you can just find this on the Events tab of the SQFI webpage. Okay, next up are the SQF Information Days. For those who are not familiar, an Information Day is a day-long face-to-face informational seminar, and this is designed to introduce food suppliers at all levels of the food chain to the benefits of food safety and food quality certification. The goal is to make sure that attendees leave with new insights, new connections, and also a clear understanding of how they can implement a food safety and food quality program that best fits the needs of their business and also the needs of their customers. So as you can see on the screen, we've already had 3 of our information days this year, and we have 2 that are coming up in September. We have one in Guelph, Ontario that's coming up on September 20th, and then we have another one that's going to be held in Cincinnati, Ohio, and this is going to be at the Kroger offices. Eurofins, who is our sponsor and our speaker for today, we actually just held one at their facility in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and that was a huge success. Okay, another event which you're already very familiar with because you're currently attending one is the SQF Learning Lunch Series. And the purpose of the Learning Lunch Series is to provide SQF stakeholders and any other interested parties with some information on topics that impact the implementation, the maintenance, and the support of an SQF system. These are free seminars, and they're also really great for keeping informed about important industry issues, as well as strengthening your goals for continuous improvement. And this year, we've expanded our tracks to include a Spanish track, and later on this year, we're going to be incorporating a webinar track that is geared towards our suppliers and stakeholders in the Australia, Asia Pacific region. Now, as I navigate to the next slide, you can see what remaining topics we have for this year. Obviously, today we're doing Step Up for Quality with Gary Smith, and then we have 2 more scheduled for the rest of the year. And something to keep in mind is that if you are ever unable to attend a live session but you have an interest in a topic, we do record the presentations and we put them up on YouTube so that you have the ability to listen to the advice and the insights at a later date whenever it's convenient for you. Okay, next slide. Another event which might be of interest to you is the Professional Update Series. This is an annual 4-hour webinar that's required for the re-registration of SQF professionals. So specifically, this is geared towards the auditors, the trainers, the consultants. However, really anybody that's interested is welcome to attend. It's most frequently held as a webinar, and the updates, they occur quarterly, and they include topics such as updates to the SQF program. We review the results of the compliance and integrity program. We look at what training is coming down the pipe, any enhancements to the database, GIFSI benchmarking, et cetera, et cetera. We would encourage any registered SQF professionals to sign up for your annual professional update well before your expiration date. And of course, like I said, anyone else that would wish to attend just to hear these updates and the information presented, you're more than welcome to join. We also have our SQF Auditor and Auditing SQF Systems training courses. These are very popular courses taught exclusively by SQF. We are the only ones who ever teach an SQF auditing course. And they are typically held just outside of Chicago, Illinois, and I believe it's Oak Brook. We have one more classes being held there. That's in December. We have the 5-day lead auditor, and then we also have the SQF systems training. We also have 2 special courses that focus on SQF systems, one that's going to be held in Montreal and one that's going to be held in Sydney, Australia. I'm sure that doesn't apply to most of you, but just in case you know anyone who's interested, it's pretty rare that we do have the regional courses, so we wanted to bring that to your attention. We also have some specialized auditor trainings that we teach. There's one that's for packaging auditor training, and then we also have ethical sourcing. The next specialized auditor training that we're going to be holding will be at the SQF conference that's in Orlando, Florida this year. Oh, my slides are a little out of order. And for those who are not aware, the SQF conference is our annual conference, and it's designed and developed by your peers in the food safety industry. And the goal is to provide a really unique and valuable opportunity to gain knowledge and skills and to strengthen your food safety and your food quality assurance programs. We want to help you connect and collaborate with your peers, and we're looking to help enhance your professional career. And just to give you an idea of some of the topics that are covered at this conference, like I said, we're really about professional development, and the 2 days that are scheduled before the actual conference starts, we dedicate that to specialized training classes. We have most of them listed up here, but these are not all of them. But you might find something of interest. And if you find yourself able to travel to Florida at the end of October, or if you might be considering attending the conference, I would urge you to check out some of the training classes and sign up, because it's kind of convenient when you're attending that to kind of take care of that portion as well. Okay, and last but not least, I forgot I put this out of order. Okay, there we go. Last but not least, we at SQF are often in attendance at many of the industry trade shows and conferences. If you ever find yourself out and about at one of these events, please feel free to look us up, stop by the booth and say hi. We would really love to answer any questions that you might have about SQF. We also typically carry copies of our codes or other important documents that you might find useful. So please feel free to stop by and say hi. Okay, thank you so much. Without further ado, I would like to transfer the mic on over to Gary Smith, the Director of Food Safety Services at Eurofins, who is going to give us an overview of Eurofins and also kick off today's presentation. Gary?
All right, thank you very much, Leslie. Really appreciate that and appreciate everyone's attention today. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we will be covering the quality portion of the SQF Code, specifically focusing on the transition from Level 2 certification, Food Safety Management certification, up to Product Quality Management Systems certification, and talk through some of the findings, some of the challenges, some of the obstacles, and some of those ways to overcome those. And then I'll also give you just a quick little hint as to what SQF version 8 may be looking like, specifically in regards to quality as we go into our next versioning of the standard, which will be happening here fairly shortly. And I know Leanne is going to be providing a webinar on those changes as well, and I'm sure you'll see information on that as you go through. First, I'd like to take just a minute to talk about Eurofins. I've been with Eurofins for a little over 2 years. As Leslie said, I'm Director of Food Safety Certification, so I am over our certification, auditing, training, and consulting groups. I participate and work very closely with our laboratories, but Eurofins is a very large global analytical service provider. We specialize in food and feed testing, as well as pharmaceutical services, environmental services, product testing. Our goal is to be the world's largest provider of bioanalytical services, worldwide. Again, we do have many different service areas for the food industry that we focus on. Certainly anything that is tested, food testing, we can execute, if not here in North America, then somewhere globally. And you did see from that last slide that we do have a large presence in North America as well. Allergens, non-GMO, heavy metal, mycotoxins, pesticide residue, a full range of nutritional analysis. Obviously, food safety is the section that I am responsible for. We are a training center, consulting group, auditing, and a full service certification body as well. We do have a full range of microbiology services with regional laboratories to assist you with turnaround time expectations, et cetera. And then we do have other biogenomics and other areas to which we focus on as well. So a full specialty of analytical services. We are, as I said, we are a full service training provider for training in an SQF licensed training center. If you enjoy the webinar and would like to hear more of the different types of training that Eurofins can offer, certainly we encourage you to visit our website, eurofins.us.com/food, and we will have a full range of SQF, advanced practitioner, FSMA, et cetera, food safety training courses. We are a provider of auditing services as well, so we have a full range of first and second party audits that we provide. Our first party would be partnerships with many of our customers there, the International Bottled Water Association, American Feed Institute, et cetera. And then, of course, we have our second party branded audits, GMP, distribution center, good laboratory practice, identity preservation, which is a new product that we've put out that it will help facilities manage their food fraud opportunities, which we'll talk a little bit more as we talk on the preview of some of the changes to SQF going forward. And then, globally, we are a full service certification body as well. SQF certainly by far our largest scheme to which we certify to, but we do cover the other major GFSI recognized manufacturing schemes as well, in addition to a few additional ones like the gluten-free certification, international safe eat, safe food, et cetera. QS. And, I do want to just take a second to recognize that, that's a very technical field, food safety auditing and training and whatnot, but, when really people work with us and why they want to continue to work with us going forward is it's because our attention to customer service. And we make a point that every touch point that we have with the customer has to be a great experience for the customer. And, it starts with our scheduler, and it starts with our salespeople, and it certainly continues with our auditors and our trainers. But we're really dedicated to providing that top-level customer service to our clients. And then just finally, I want to, recognize that SQF is a hugely important partner for us at Eurofins. We've been a long partner with SQF. Previously, I actually used to work for SQF. I was the technical director from the 5th edition to 6th editions for the standard and have been intimately involved with it for many, many years. While at Eurofins, we are a certification body and training center committee member. As Leslie mentioned, we did host the SQF Information Day at our flagship laboratory in Lancaster, Pennsylvania last week, and it was very successful. We are on the committee that will be launching the 8th edition and revising and launching the 8th edition of the standard, which I'll give you a little preview of that at the end of our discussion. Obviously, performing our learning lunch today. We are active participants in those training classes and on the agenda at the SQF conference and have been so for a few years. And we're very proud and excited to be a platinum sponsor at the upcoming SQF conference here in 2016 in Orlando. So very excited about that, and we recognize that Eurofins and SQF are great partners, and we're very excited to work with SQF specifically on, all things, and of course today on the learning lunch. So to the presentation at hand. Again, what I want to talk about specifically is moving from level 2 to level 3. I know many folks have that level 2, that GFSI recognized level, and they're interested and curious and questions about level 3. So we want to focus the primary parts of the presentation on that. We'll talk about the HACCP model for quality. Talk about what that means, talk about what's good about it, talk about what some challenges are with that, and understand kind of how we need to move forward with that and make the most of that. We're going to identify some of the common mistakes or nonconformities that folks have when they move to level 3, and give you some solutions or some recommendations on how to avoid some of those common mistakes that folks make when they go to level 3. And then, as I said, we have identified that quality specifically will look very different in version 8 of the SQF standard. So I did want to spend just a few minutes and give you an update on what the new standard will have specifically on quality. We'll touch base real briefly on some of the other areas as well. But one of the biggest changes to version 8 for SQF standard is going to be the quality certification component. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that. So let's talk a little bit about what is required for level 3 certification. When you move from level 2 to level 3, a couple of things to think about. First off, the only difference between level 2 and level 3 is found in module 2. The rest of the module 3 through module 15, which are the prerequisite programs or the food safety fundamentals, depending on obviously your food sector category, those do not have any level differences. So level 1, level 2, level 3, the module 3 through module 15, the PRPs, the prerequisite programs, those criteria are the same no matter what level you're at. So we need to look in module 2 for the only differences between module 1 or levels 1, 2, and 3. And when we look in module 2 for level 3 certification, we find a couple of things that aren't surprising. They're very quality focused, and a few things are a little bit different. Let's look at, obviously, a quality manual is included. So instead of just a food safety manual at level 2, we need a quality manual at level 3. In it, we have to have standard operating procedures that talk about how to manage quality and how quality is managed within the facility. And then, of course, we must have the quality plan, which we'll talk about in just a minute. When we get into specifications in 232, obviously, not surprisingly, the finished product raw material specifications must include quality components as well, not just food safety components. And generally, most of your product specifications are going to have quality attributes included in them, so that's not really that big a deal. Of course, 244 is the quality plan itself. We're going to focus on that in just a minute, so I'll hold on that and talk a bit more about that. One of the things that folks often overlook is that in 245, we talk about quality controls assessed for approved suppliers. So when you're at level 3, not only are you interested in obviously your product quality control parameters and processes, but you must have part of your approved supplier program including how do your suppliers manage their product quality. So, you know, in addition to just asking how do they manage food safety, which is at level 2, at level 3, you have to ask how do they manage their product quality. Now, they don't have to be SQF certified for level 3, but they do need to have some components, some understanding of how do they ensure that they meet your requirements of your raw material specifications of product coming in. Another thing that is often overlooked, which is not that surprising though, verification of meeting your customer specification prior to your product release. So again, this is customer specification focused, which is product quality focused. So you have to have some formal sign-off release of the product to say, we've done a review, we're confident the product meets our customer specifications, so it can be released. Another one, product sensory analysis conducted by trained personnel. Obviously only focused on level 3 because we're talking about product quality and those sensory analyses. Another piece there that is a little bit different, which kind of corresponds with some new criteria that's coming down, is identity preserved food. Now, only at level 3 is identity preserved food criteria included. It really isn't product quality. It is and it isn't. The facility must have controls in place to preserve specific identities. So what that means is if you have claims that you make on your products, 281 basically says how do you ensure that the products that you're claiming meet those claims. So, for example, if you have, I mean, it can be as far as if you have fat-free products, how do you ensure that that product is fat-free versus your regular product? If you're GMO-free, how do you ensure that, you know, certain product is non-GMO, whereas certain product, you know, is normal? Gluten-free, organic, you know, antibiotic-free. Any of those types of claims that are specifically an identity claim, basically 281, the criteria there says how do you manage within your facility to identify, to separate, segregate that product that you're claiming is whatever versus the product that you're not making a claim against. So that's what 281 is, and that's what it focuses on. And then finally, 292 is on training, and of course we must have a training program that includes product quality attributes as well. So we would need to have, in addition to food safety and HACCP and GMPs, at level 3 you have to have training as well. So those are the other components of level 3. Obviously the rest of my discussion is going to be on the food quality plan, but understand that it's not just quality at level 3. There are a few other things that kick in at level 3 that your auditor, that you need to be aware of, and that obviously your auditor will be auditing you against for that next phase of certification. So let's look at the product quality criteria, and this is directly from the SQF standard. Let's see what it says. Product quality plan shall be developed, implemented, and maintained in accordance with the HACCP method. Okay, so we're going to talk about what that means in just a minute, but that's what the standard says. So the standard says we have to use the HACCP method in building our food quality plan. To outline the means by which the organization controls and assures food quality. So specifically in 244, it says that we have to do a quality risk analysis. And we know from HACCP, you know, risk assessments, risk analysis are an essential part of HACCP. And certainly even with FSMA, or risk analysis, hazard analysis is the first step there. So we know that that's important. So we'll talk a little bit about how do we do that for quality as opposed to food safety, which we may be much more familiar with. We have to have measures that apply controls to monitor quality. So that means we have to take steps to ensure that we take controls to monitor product quality. Important part here, include process controls at quality points in production to monitor quality from set parameters and make corrections. Okay, so we've got a process control with basically a target, a parameter, a target. We're monitoring that target, and then we must take corrections when we have deviations from that parameter or from that target. So very HACCP-like activities around a process control point, a quality point. So we have to have a target, which is essential to a critical limit like HACCP. We have to monitor it. We have to take corrective action when our monitoring shows we're not in control. And then, of course, we have to have records for it as well, which aren't kept here, but it's in another part of Module 2. The product quality plan must, of course, cover a food or food group. It is process-specific. It's not product-specific. So it's one product quality plan should cover a unique process with a bunch of products that are produced within that process. And then, of course, it must include work instructions and SOPs. So let's look at the HACCP method itself and specifically to say, what does that mean? So it's the 12 steps of HACCP that we're very probably all understanding, the 5 preliminary steps, and then, of course, the 7 principles falls into that, and to adapt it for quality. So basically, when your auditor is in and when you're building your quality plan, those 5 preliminary steps would be very similar to your steps that you took to build your HACCP program. However, they are a little bit different. So let's just point out a couple of things. Number one, your food quality development plan development team. Who should be on that would be a little bit different from your HACCP team? Definitely you would want to have someone from sales and or marketing included on your product quality team that you probably wouldn't have on your food safety team. They're going to give you that customer perspective. They're going to give you the market analysis. They're going to give you the understanding to say, here's the key attributes of our product that make our product unique. Here's what really drives product quality for us. Here's what the customer's expectations are. You see step 2 there, product specification. So we're using that specification and that product specification as a reference to say, well, here's what our customer is telling us is important about the product that we're producing for them. Therefore, we need to take that into account, certainly when we build our product quality plan. Some of the things so those are kind of unique to the food safety plan, those 2 steps, the team and who the members of the team should be, and the use of the product specification. Certainly we don't do that on the HACCP side of building out a HACCP plan. Intended use, flow diagram, verification of flow diagrams, those can all be done as part of your HACCP program. You're not going to have anything different. I mean, the process is the process. We flow it the same way. The people are using it the same way. So those types of things are going to be very similar. But again, it's important to understand what's unique with the product quality piece, potentially different people, and again, using that product specification as a reference. When we get into the HACCP principles themselves, the risk analysis, which we'll talk about in just a minute, how do we look at quality versus food safety? But once we go through that, again, as we look back from the standard, determining what process control step is important, what are our targets, how do we monitor it, how do we have corrective action for it, how do we verify that we're doing what we say we're doing and it's effective, and then, of course, keeping records of that. Those are all the HACCP principles that we're all very, very familiar with. And that must be part of your product quality plan as well when you're building that. And that's what auditors are going to be looking for. Have you followed these steps? Have you followed this model? Have you followed this strategy in building out your quality plan? And that's specifically what the standard asks for. So when we look at risk analysis for quality, it's different, the same strategy as food safety, but it's a different consequence. And that's really what we're focusing on is the different consequences. Obviously when we look at food safety risk analysis, we're looking at illness or injury. We're looking at potential, death versus illness versus limited spread versus, somebody cracking a tooth because they've had metal in their product. On the quality side, it's much more focused on the customer. And we're much more focused on things like, if you look down at the consequence of number 5, the customer may not even know if the moisture level is off 2% or, that the color is a little wrong or the odor is a little different. So it's those events that a customer might not even notice all the way up to, well, a customer, if this happens, we're probably going to lose their business. So it's much more focused on the customer and, of course, the consequences of the customer, the responses of the customer. So you see down the customer list there, from business ceasing, obviously, is the worst case scenario, to where we have to do a level 3 product quality recall. We get a a load rejected because we failed to meet specification. We get a warning letter saying, your product didn't meet our spec. If you do it again, we're going to have, potential rejections or loss of business. And again, all the way down to a consequence of a customer may not even notice that, that parameter has not been met or is out of place. So you take those consequences and you compare it against the frequency or the probability. How likely is that to happen? So it's still, severity versus probability, when we're assessing those risks. But again, the key is the risks are just different. We're not hurting anybody. We're not, potentially going to, make anybody sick. It's just now a matter of we're not meeting their specification. We're not meeting their expectations. We're not, they're not happy with it. So from common occurrence to, it happens, every month, happens every week, happens on a daily basis, as opposed to it's been known to occur, maybe it's happened once a year, maybe it's happened since I've worked here. It could happen, it's happened within our industry, but it hasn't happened here with us. We would never expect something like that to occur to all the way down to a frequency of, that's completely impossible. So this is a tool. It's not the only tool. There's a lot of, risk assessment tools that are out there to help you try to make it more objective. Assessing risk can be very subjective. It's, well, I think this or I think that. So this is a tool, and if you've taken the SQF training classes, I'm sure this is very familiar with you. This is what we teach in the Implementing SQF Systems class. This is a tool to help you make the assessment of risk more objective, because you're putting it on a number, you're putting it on an axis, you're assigning it a value, and you're making it much more data related as opposed to, well, I think this or I think that. So this is just one tool that many people use to try to, assess risk and make it objective. So here's an example, again, directly out of the SQF training class of what a product quality program may look like. And in this one, we're talking about chicken. And specifically, obviously, on a food safety side, we're talking about cooking chicken, and this is the step we're focusing on. But from a quality side, we're focusing on the color of the chicken. So we know that, a nice cooked chicken has got a nice brown tint to it. It's not too dark. It's not chicken jerky, but it's also not too white, because then it doesn't look like it's cooked. So aesthetically, they're looking for a nice light brown glazed type chicken appearance. And that's what our control step would be. Our parameter would be a nice brown chicken breast. And then that would be considered our process point. We have color parameters. Maybe we have a white all the way to a dark brown, and we're trying to hit colors in the middle where it's a light brown to a medium brown. And we have different colors to say these colors are acceptable and these other colors are unacceptable. So we have kind of a color spectrum that tells the monitor what works and what would meet our targets and what would not meet our targets. And it says there basically that we do these checks every 15 minutes as the product is exiting the oven. Our corrective action would be training of staff, adjust the temperature of the oven, et cetera, et cetera. This is done, verified by the operations manager. And, of course, we keep records, and that could be things like our quality assurance temperature log, where we're recording the temperature for HACCP, and then we're doing a visual check for our quality plan as well. So just to give you an idea there with, what a product quality plan may look like, obviously it's going to look very similar to what a HACCP plan would look like, focused on different aspects, though, focused on different processes, in that case, color. Now, what's wrong with the HACCP method for quality? Why have there been concerns? And there has been concerns raised from certification to level 3 from retailers. There's concerns raised by government officials. There's been concern raised by even manufacturers themselves that, well, the level 3 in theory is a great aspect and a great tool, but it's really not capturing the essence of what we're trying, the intent of what we're trying to build with that product quality certification. It's really not achieving our goals as to what we're trying to achieve with that, that level 3 certification. Well, why not? Well, let's think about, we're all in the age of FSMA right now, and we're, basically one day away from the implementation date of the first FSMA requirement. So FSMA is on everyone's mind. Well, let's think about, why is FSMA here? Why didn't the FDA basically just say, well, let's just create a HACCP rule for everyone as opposed to, only seafood or only fruit juice. But they didn't. They said, well, we know that critical control points can't control all hazards. And if you look at some of the top recalls, we have things like allergen management, we have things like listeria and environmental monitoring. Those aren't in people's HACCP plans, but yet they're still vital and important to food safety. So the agency came up with, the preventive controls as opposed to CCPs because it had to be more encompassing, more widely encompassing. CCPs can't control all hazards. Other programs must step in. Things like prerequisite programs, and now, some of those things are going to be defined as preventive controls within the new FSMA rule. So the problem that we've had so far with Level 3 is that so many companies are taking that HACCP model literally and saying we're, much like we do on the HACCP side where we're trying to minimize our CCPs and we roll a lot of those controls into our PRPs or even now preventive controls, we're trying to minimize the number of critical quality points that we have down to 0 or 1, like we minimize those CCPs. And we're focusing on managing quality outside of the product quality plan by rolling them into CQPs or other programs outside of the SQF quality plan. But let's look back for a minute to what does the standard say about the quality plan. If you notice what the standard says, and the language exists today, doesn't mention critical quality points at all. It specifically says that the product quality plan must include process controls at quality points in production to monitor quality from set parameters and make corrections to keep the process under control. It doesn't say at critical quality points. It says at quality points. So too many folks have taken that HACCP method too literally and said, we're only going to focus on the critical quality points, and all of those other quality points that really does drive quality of the product, we'll manage them, but we're not going to manage them within our product quality plan. And that was definitely never the intent of SQF. The intent of SQF was that all process quality points will be managed through the quality plan, not just critical ones. But that is where we're at today. Too many people have minimized, there's way too many plans out there that have 0 critical quality points or maybe only 1 critical quality point, and that is missing the intent completely, which is why we're going to see revisions in version 8 that has a much more effective focus on managing product quality. Some of the other challenges with the HACCP method today within SQF is that auditors often don't question the company's quality decisions, because when we train our auditors, we're training them on HACCP, we're training them on food safety, we're training them on food safety hazards, and we also train them to say, you know what, no one knows the product quality better than the facility. So auditors will challenge a company on, salmonella in a chicken. Why don't you have that listed as a hazard in your hazard analysis? Or listeria in a ready-to-eat environment. Why don't you have that listed as a hazard in your hazard analysis? Or allergens or whatnot. Auditors will challenge companies on that. But if a facility doesn't have moisture listed in their product quality plan, they won't challenge them on that because they're not as comfortable with it. They don't know it as well. The facility manages their product quality. They don't. So they're not going to make those challenges. They're not going to push back on those facilities, as it were, and say, well, why aren't you measuring salt? Why aren't you measuring bricks? Why aren't you measuring viscosity? And why don't you have that in your product quality plan? Auditors won't do that, or they won't today. And that's, as a certification body and as an industry, that's one thing that we are going to have to do when we move to Level 3 and we move to, enhancing that product quality certification. In addition to training the industry better on how to manage product quality, we're also going to have to train the auditors better so that they understand what a product quality plan is supposed to look like. That's one thing that Leanne and I at SQF are working very diligently on to ensure that auditors truly do understand what's the difference between a food safety plan and a product quality plan. So let me give you an example. This is a real-life example that came to me while I was here at Eurofins. Had a company who wanted to transfer to us as their certification body. They were SQF Level 3. Obviously, they made sour cream. And in our discussion, they were concerned, though, whenever you transfer certification bodies, you're always afraid of the devil, you don't know. They like to think of us auditors as potentially devils, I guess. But they were concerned that when we, at level 3 certification, how were we going to look at their product quality plans? So I had a call with the director of quality assurance for this company, and they said, we want to walk through this with you and just kind of get your take on where things are at. And they said, let's talk specifically about our sour cream. And I said, okay, well, sour cream, obviously you get your product quality attributes from your specifications. So in this case, they were supplying their sour cream to the USDA. So we looked at the USDA and we looked at their specifications for sour cream. And not surprisingly, when you think about sour cream, if you're a fan of sour cream like I am, you think about it being white. You think about it being, a little bit acidic, a little bit bitter, a little bit tart. Kind of got that cultured flavor to it. It's smooth. It's creamy. It's thick. It's not runny. Again, in that acid, that slightly bitter taste, you get a titratable acidity of the target of 0.6. Certain fat content. You like it to be smooth. You like it to be, not gritty. Temperature, obviously, 40 degrees or less. It is, a highly perishable product. pH, because you're adding that lactic acid in, you want a pH, at least 4.3 or below. Size obviously depends on, from 4-ounce small sizes all the way up to 16 ounces and whatnot. It depends on, your customer container and whatnot. And then you got some micro elements in there as well. So, in looking at their product specifications, I was talking to them and I said, okay, well, and they said, well, what would you expect to be in our product quality plan? And in looking at these types of things, I basically expected pretty much, probably not the micro because, we don't like, you like real-time activities on the product quality plan. You want process controls, and really microbiology is not a process control. I mean, yeast and mold is anywhere from a 3 to 5 day test. Coliforms is a 48-hour test. So, that's a verification step, but it's not process quality. But certainly color, flavor, texture, titratable acidity, fat, temperature, pH, size, those are all things we can monitor real time. Those are all things we can set process controls for. Those are all things we can set targets for. Those are all things we can monitor. And therefore, basically, I assumed those types of attributes would be in all of those attributes except the micro, would be in their product quality plan. Well, when they reviewed their product quality plan with me, they only had weight or size. And they didn't have any of the other attributes displayed on the screen in the product quality plan. And I asked them the question. I said, well, I assume you monitor those other activities. And they said, oh, yes, we do. And I said, well, why aren't they in your product quality plan? And they said, well, because we don't consider them critical quality points. We only consider them quality points. And therefore, because we don't consider them critical quality points, we don't put them in our product quality plan. We only have our CQP, which is weight, in our quality plan, and we manage and monitor everything else, but it doesn't rise to the level of product quality within our program. And they've been certified for many years to level 3 by another certification body. So, to me, this illustrates, basically what was wrong with the way we're currently doing the SQF level 3 certification and to SQF as well, for that matter, which is what prompted the review and the change to version 8, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. I mean, the intention of product quality certification is, a product quality plan for sour cream should have these attributes in it, and they should have parameters, and they should be monitored, and they should have corrective action, and they should have records. And that's the intention, and I think that's the way we're going to be moving with version 8 of the SQF standard. Now, even the way we're at today, if you look at the data from level 2, module 2, level 3 certification, we see that, still 11% of our product quality plan audits at level 3 are having non-conformities. So, even with the, literal HACCP model interpretation, we're still having some nonconformities found by auditors out there. And I'm sure some of them are asking the question of, if I'd have been auditing the sour cream facility that I just gave you, I would have asked the question, well, why aren't these attributes within your product quality plan? Because they certainly should be. and maybe that would have been a nonconformance. And I'm sure that some of these nonconformances, that's the case. But let's take a look and see what they are, what those nonconformities are. Not all product quality attributes are managed in the product quality program. That was the most common nonconformance. If you look at that 300 plus nonconformities that were identified from Module 2, there were auditors who were pushing back and saying, you know what, it's not just critical quality points. All process quality controls must be in your quality plan per as the standard states. So some folks were pushing back on that. Other areas of nonconformance are no criteria or targets established for quality points. I know I've talked to some customers, and when you go into those inspection stations at the end of the line, right at packaging, and you talk to the folks who are doing those monitorings, I ask them the question, and interviewing is an important part of the SQF audit, as I'm sure, anyone who's certified understands that. And as you're talking to those quality monitors and you're asking the question, well, what is it supposed to be when you're looking at the color, when you're looking at the flavor, when you're looking at the size or weight or texture or whatever, what's it supposed to be? And one of the areas that is probably least understood is, a lot of it is, well, it depends. It depends on the time of the year. It depends on the time of the day. It depends on the line. It depends on so there's a lot of variance that a lot of times isn't documented. So, establish targets for what that quality range should be, those parameters of quality. What's the minimum? What's the maximum? What's the acceptable? What's unacceptable? Really defining that well, it was an area that was also found to be common in nonconformities. No documented training for those folks who are doing that monitoring at the end of the lines or by QA or production or whomever is doing it. Have we trained them on exactly, what those parameters are, what the ranges are, what's good, what's bad, and have we documented that training? And that was an area we also found common nonconformances for. And then lastly, whenever we do have, issues with we didn't meet the target, we didn't meet the range, we weren't taking corrective actions and we weren't documenting those corrective actions. And again, a lot of folks think that, well, it's quality, so we don't have to have it as prescriptive or described as nonconformities as we do as food safety things, because obviously for food safety we can make somebody sick or whatnot. On quality side, maybe nobody will even notice if our bricks is too high or our moisture is too low or whatever. But again, if we've set that parameter and we've set that target and we've set that range, if we don't meet it, we have to, and it may be, we rework the product, but maybe we extend the product, and maybe we do other things with it. It doesn't have to be hold to release, but we do have to take some kind of action when our targets have not been met, and that was the last major type of nonconformance that was described from auditors in auditing those level 3 facilities. So what would we expect to see in a product quality plan? What are we expecting to look for? And it certainly, obviously it's very dependent on the type of product. But there are some that are going to be, relatively similar. I think some foundation of quality of still, the things that we produce in the industry. Obviously, product weight. I mean, everything has a weight. Every product we package has a weight, be it from 1 ounce to 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 50 pounds, 55 pound gallon drums, whatever. Everything's got a weight. Everything's got a size attribute to it. So a count, a color, a weight, size, length, width. Those are going to be fairly standard, again, depending on what it is you're making. In some cases, maybe nobody cares. In some cases, it does make a difference. Color, depending on what you make, certainly could be important as well. Flavor, obviously, again, depending on what it is. Texture, moisture, defects, different types of solids. Again, certain products, bricks with sugar content, titratable acidity with added acid, fat, temperature for perishable products, type of label, type of code date, the pH, viscosity, salt. I mean, this is certainly not an fully inclusive list. There are, many, many, many different types of attributes that could be included in a product quality plan. But I think, the key is, and the intention of SQF is that if the attribute drives the quality of the product, if it's in the product specification from your customer, it should be in your documented, described product quality plan for level 3 certification today. If it's, if you find and the auditors are trained to look at the product specification from the customer, look at the product quality plan, and if there are attributes listed in the product specification that are not in the product quality plan, there needs to be a really good reason why not. Because, really that customer is telling you by that product specification, here's what matters to us. Here's what's important in that product performance criteria. So really that's for you, which is why it's important to have that product specification in step 2 of your development of your product quality plan and in that preliminary activities is that product specification is your reference to build your product quality plan. It's also the auditor's reference to assess your product quality plan. So it's really, important that those two things match very closely. So what are the benefits of level 3 certification? And I think those are probably fairly well understood, but I will say that, you get some unintended benefits from it as well. I think there's data upon data upon data that shows when a facility moves from level 2 to level 3 and they really get an understanding of defining their process and standardizing and structuring a lot of those parameters and quality checks and whatnot, what they see is they see their process much more robust and they see their non-conforming product reduced. And what that does is obviously saves us money. It saves the facility money when we're driving down our non-conforming product costs and we're not having to have as much rework, we're not having to have as much touch points, and that obviously is a big fan to everybody within the facility. So, many folks have seen, I remember, one regional grocery store chain that had quite a few manufacturing facilities. So once they moved to level 3, their first year, they saw their non-conforming product costs reduced by $6 million because of that level 3 attention to detail of their product quality. Other things you see, obviously reduction of downtime even. Again, we're really getting an understanding about the process and the process capabilities and, more preventive maintenance and more attention to that. So there's some attributes there that can be gained. Certainly customer complaints. Obviously, if we're controlling our process much better and we're doing a much better job of monitoring that product specification for that customer, the thoughts certainly are on the performance of the product. We should drive down those complaints. Improving of product awareness and process awareness of our own employees. Internal stakeholder awareness. We have to do training on the product quality attributes. We have to do training on the product specification. We have to do training to our monitors and our production folks and our quality techs on what is the product supposed to look like? How is it supposed to perform? What's it supposed to act like? And, just making everyone more aware of that is an improvement, which is a good thing as well. And, when folks feel empowered because you've given them a lot of information and you put them in charge to say, you know what, you're responsible for here, this is your spot, and if you've got to make sure it's right, that improves that food safety culture. And, culture is one thing that we're seeing a lot of activity around, we're seeing a lot of talking about, but it's very difficult to define, what is a food safety culture, how does that work, and what a good product quality program in place and a level 3 certification, it means that there's a lot of good training and a lot of good communication within the employees, which is going to help drive and promote food safety culture. And then, lastly, selflessly, I guess, new customers. I think if you can, brag on that you are level 3 SQF certified, I believe that has a lot of weight within the industry. That means a lot to a lot of retailers to say, if you're going to be a private label supplier of ours, we expect you to be level 3 certified to SQF, and if you are, that opens up a lot of potential opportunities for you. So what are some of the keys and successful transitions to move from level 2 to level 3? Well, obviously be familiar with all the different aspects of the level 3 standard. As I said, it's much more than just product quality. There is the identity preservation, there's the specifications, there's the training, the assessment of the supplier's quality program. So there's a lot more to level 3 than just building a product quality plan yourself. Have that different mentality for managing quality versus safety, whereas safety, in HACCP, we're trying to minimize our CCPs. We're trying to push a lot of those controls into prerequisite programs, et cetera, just because they fit better. Well, within quality, that's not the case. I mean, those product quality process points, those process controls that affect quality, be it, again, whatever they are, temperature, weight, color, moisture, whatever. Be more inclusive in quality than less. Add more in than less. The intention there is cover the entire process. Every process parameter that affects that process quality should be included in your process quality plan. Don't minimize and only focus on critical quality points because, again, if you look at the standard, that's not what it says. It says process control, not critical quality points. And, again, focus on using a different team, having sales included, having marketing included, giving them somebody who's the advocate for the customer, somebody who's got that customer's perspective. I think that's an important piece that is missed a lot of times on those product quality teams. Empower those monitors to take action when monitoring shows that something's not right. It doesn't look right. It falls outside of our range. It falls outside of our window. It's too low. It's too high. Make sure that they feel empowered to be able to hit the stop button and say, product's got to go on hold. The line's got to stop until we make an adjustment and get it right. Of course, provide product quality training. Over-communicate those quality goals. Establish your targets. Make sure the targets are consistent with the product specification. Make sure they're doable. Make sure the monitors understand what they are, and they're well-defined. Try to make them as objective as possible. Color appropriate. Well, what does that mean? You need to have, a low and a high. You need pictures. You need, pictures are, especially in quality attributes, pictures are fantastic because it gives you an objective target as opposed to, the color is acceptable or the flavor is acceptable. What does that mean? So the more that we can make it objective instead of subjective, the better off we're going to be. And I would just say my last advice here is don't underestimate, that jump from level 2 to level 3. I have many clients who still aren't certified and come to us and say, hey, we want to get SQF certified, but we're going to jump right to level 3. And I'll be like, well, okay, but understand that is a big jump. And there is a big jump between level 2 and level 3, even though it's only a few questions on the checklist and in the standard. But, from a culture standpoint, from a habit standpoint, from a mentality standpoint, that is a big jump. So just make sure that you don't underestimate, that level 3 is a big deal. And ideally you'd like to go level 2 first, get a year of that under your belt, and then, your next recertification cycle, maybe expand your scope and add level 3. And at that point, that will, give you a better chance for success to move to that next level. So now what I want to do is kind of change gears just a bit in the last few minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. It seems we've had a few come in. Talk a little bit about version 8 of SQF. Now, there are more changes to SQF than just quality. And obviously the biggest one there you see on the screen is food fraud. And this is the product quality webinar, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on some of these other changes to level 8 other than just kind of introduce them to you. There will be much more information coming out from SQF on version 8 and what version 8 is going to look like. But food fraud is one of the additions that has come all the way down from GFSI. I believe it's going to be in the product identity 2.8 area of the SQF standard, where you're going to have to do basically a vulnerability assessment within your supply chain to determine what are our risks for substitution or fraud, and then what are we going to do about them to assess those risks or to control those risks and make sure that we minimize them. Going to be a little bit upgrade on management commitment. Again, we want to see some more facilitation of culture. So how do you define that? How do you drive that within the standard? So there'll be some work on that, trying to make sure that the management commitment is a bit more enhanced. Active feedback from customers versus just waiting on customer complaints. So, previously folks have said, do you have any complaints? No, we never hear from our customers. We never have complaints. Well, now companies are going to have to actually go out and do surveys of customers to say, give us some feedback on how we're doing. We're not just going to sit back and wait, for you to complain, but we're going to go out and ask you, what do you think? How can we do better? That kind of stuff. So we're going to have a survey system in place as well. And then good laboratory practices, we're going to enhance that a little bit because the in-plant food lab is used quite a bit for making important decisions and determinations on product disposition. So we really need to make sure that the results coming out of those labs are valid and reliable. So we're going to have, SQF's going to have an enhanced section on our good laboratory practice part of the audit as well. But let's talk about quality and what does version 8 hold so far. And again, it's not final. It's still in development mode, but here's what we're looking at so far. There is no more going to be a level 3 certification. So product quality is going to be a separate module. Food safety will be a prerequisite. So you will have to have an SQF level 2, or basically now we're going to call it a food safety management system. So you'll have to have food safety management certification before you can get product quality management, which is what level 3 is going to be known as going forward. It's no longer going to be level 3. It's going to be known as product quality management. So to get product quality management, you will have to have food safety already in place. So it's going to be like a prerequisite. It's going to be a separate checklist. It's going to be a separate audit day. It's going to be independent from the food safety management. So, you'll get a certain rating, you'll get sort of results from your food safety management or your level 2 certification today. And, then you'll get your module for product quality, and it will be completely different. So let's just say, for example, heaven forbid that your food safety certification goes really well and you score really well, and maybe you get an E rating on that, and then you do your product quality the next day and that doesn't go so well, and maybe you fail it. That's not going to affect your food safety certification. So you're still going to have your E rating for level 2, and that's what's going to be displayed on the website, and that's what you're going to be able to share with your customers. So it's going to be, again, an independent assessment of product quality above and beyond and separate from food safety. So there won't be any carryover. So those nonconformities from the product quality are going to be separate from food safety, going to be managed separate from food safety, and will not affect your food safety rating. So I know a lot of folks are resistant to deal with the quality piece because they have to have, a minimum food safety certification to be able to sell to customers. And that's not going to change that. What's going to, it's going to be your food safety certification is going to be above and beyond. It's going to be separate. And then your quality will be different, separate, independent, completely isolated from the findings of your food safety side. So if you have both, your food safety management certification and your product quality certification, you could get 2 different groups of nonconformities that you have to manage and respond to with your certification audit. Again, the focus is going to be not on critical quality points. Now, the standard even says that today. However, it's going to really, enhance and really extend the intent that the goal of the product quality certification is to manage all of the product quality, not just what has been designated by the facility as critical quality points. So, much more like, I guess, FSMA in that, defined things are given the status of these must be, if these are present, these must be preventive controls. SQF is going to be somewhat similar to say, if you check product weight, it's going to be in your product quality plan. If you check color, it's going to be in your quality plan. If you check size, it's going to be in there. If you check count, it's going to be in there. So, there's going to be much, prescriptive isn't the right word, but there's going to be much more defined as to what the expectation is of a product quality plan versus today where it's very open. Within the new guidance and the new standard and the new checklist, the intent of managing the entire product quality process through the product quality plan will be driven through the quality module. And, of course, training for all stakeholders is needed, which, again, it is today. So, in reality, the content of what the new criteria in quality is going to be is not a whole lot different than today. It's going to be fleshed out quite a bit more, much more expanded, much more, I guess, comprehensive. But the intent of, having process controls be managed as quality when those drive the quality attributes of the product, that's there today. That's going to stay the same. So the intent of the criteria is going to stay the same. But what the goal of moving it to a separate module is to give everyone a different awareness that quality is different. Let's focus on it independently on its own, and let's make sure that we're not putting the food safety rating at risk based on how we manage or don't, perform on the quality side. So that's kind of, what we're looking at now. And obviously, Leanne will be speaking to that quite a bit as in the webinar that she's going to have on version 8 changes. But that's kind of an overview as to what version 8 with SQF is going to look like. And I believe the goal is certainly to have a draft out by October with, a final version of version 8 going into 2017. And then other parts of version 8 that are going to be changed, a traceability exercise to be done by the auditor during the audit, vulnerability assessment for food defense, enhancing the internal audit aspect a little bit more of the standard. Independence will be required. Allergen label reconciliation must be included, which kind of ties into the preventive controls if you have allergens on site. Environmental monitoring will be required for many foods, not just ready to eat. And again, that's going to tie, those two aspects tie into preventive controls. So while SQF is not going to be changing specifically to adapt to FSMA, you'll notice obviously some of the things like food defense, allergens, and environmental monitoring will move closer towards a preventive control type of activity or a intentional adulteration for food defense, which is consistent with what is in the FSMA rules today. So in summary, Level 3 certification certainly is unique amongst the GFSI food safety standards. FSSC is adding some quality components to it to try to match SQF. BRC, talks about having quality within their standard, trying to match SQF. But in reality, SQF is still quite unique in its Level 3 certification. It will evolve as we move into version 8. But it will still be unique, and I think that it's a neat aspect of SQF that, of course, is voluntary, but we'll also set SQF aside from some of the other food safety standards. To achieve those full benefits of Level 3, again, a facility must be ready to understand what the differences are and embrace the intent of Level 3, not just trying to minimize it so that you got that Level 3 certificate that hangs on the wall, but really understand what product certification is about, how do we manage our product quality, what's our focus of our process and those process controls, and how do we really educate people and over-communicate what the product quality should be. We should use those benefits of the HACCP model and again, the parameters and monitoring and corrective action and records and whatnot without taking it so literally that we're minimizing the intent by just minimizing our CQPs and only focusing on those in our product quality plan, because that was never the intent of SQF to go to Level 3. And to help manage that, though, certainly the industry as well as auditors need additional training on, what is that product quality program, what should it entail, how encompassing should it be, and what's an expectation, what do we expect a product quality plan to look like, from an auditor standpoint, how do I assess it, from an industry standpoint, how do I build it. So certainly I know SQF has come out with a new product quality training course, which as training centers we plan to be offering in 2017. I know as eurofins specifically, we plan on doing webinars to help companies adapt to the new quality module if you're already certified, or to get ready for it if it's coming up. So there will be a lot of information, a lot of communication from SQF as well as companies like eurofins to help industry get ready for that new quality module for SQF. And with that, I'd just like to say thanks very much for your time and attention. There is my contact details there on the screen. I think we are going to open it up for a few questions, but if there's anything specifically that eurofins can do for you or I can answer specifically, please feel free to shoot me an email, or you can visit our website, eurofinsus.com/food safety, and we would be very happy to provide you some assistance there. So, Leslie, at that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Gary. We do have some questions that came in, so I'm just going to scroll to the top and start there. The first question we received says, how about controlling parameters like flavor and taste for pet foods? Are they dispensable for pet foods because some products contain ingredients, for example, meat, not suitable for human consumption?
Yeah, certainly if there's a safety factor in, consuming anything. Obviously, the parameter of flavor in pet food may be excluded. However, I will say that I have been in quite a few pet food facilities, and taster is one of the top, top respected and top viewed positions within the facility. So certainly we expect, and we know in the FSMA rule that humans must be included as part of the hazard analysis for animals in the preventive controls that animal foods must go through as well. So, from a safety standpoint, I don't think, maybe from a chemical or maybe an attribute standpoint, there may be, products or elements within an animal food that a human shouldn't have from a hazard standpoint. But from a food safety standpoint, certainly, dry dog food or treats or whatnot. And again, I'm not advocating that people go out and taste them or eat them, but from a safety standpoint, there shouldn't be anything within that animal treat or that dry dog food that would make someone sick, because pet food manufacturers must look at humans as well as animals when they do their hazard analysis, especially for pet food, because consumers are bringing it into their home. Having said that, flavor, certainly color, moisture. I mean, there are many other attributes that drive the acceptability of that product in meeting its quality standards other than flavor. So I think a facility can pick whichever ones are most appropriate to them. The key is make sure they pick the ones that are most appropriate and don't just minimize it and say, weight, and that's the only parameter that we look at. We should really look at those things that drive the quality perspective of certainly the animal. And for pet food, you have to think about what is an owner expecting that kibble or pet food treat or whatever to look like when they are feeding it to their animals.
Okay, thank you. The next question is temperature a quality attribute or a food safety attribute?
Good question. I think it depends. It really depends on, certainly if you're talking about refrigeration, generally you're probably looking at a quality attribute, although I do know in certain types of food products like, seafood, pasteurized crab meat and whatnot, temperatures can be critical. And if temperature abuse happens there, you can get, outgrowth of foodborne pathogens and toxin formation and whatnot. So, it really depends. Temperature, obviously, for cooking is, of course, a food safety attribute. Temperature cold holding can be quality, can be food safety. Generally, probably going to be quality, but, again, certain parameters, certain products, depending on what your hazard analysis tells you, it may be a food safety issue as well. So, definitely I would say temperature cold holding, if you've got a perishable product, should always be in your product quality plan at a minimum. Whether it's also a food safety critical control point really depends on your hazard analysis and the types of products and hazards that you're trying to control.
Okay. Next question. If production requires raw materials to be a certain size or shape in order to get into the finished product, in order to get the finished product into packaging, is that something that should be included in the quality plan? Sub-question is, should this on the certificate of analysis from the suppliers of these raw materials?
Well, it depends. I mean, your supplier could supply you with a certificate of analysis that says we meet your product specifications in size and texture of your raw materials, and here's how we verify that those raw materials meet it. So the question would be, who's doing the checking to ensure those raw material parameters of size or texture meet your specs? Is it the customer, your supplier, and then they send you a C of A that says, yep, we've checked it, we know it's good? Or do you need to do a monitoring of it to say, well, we've got to do some process control checks to make sure, because if this is wrong at this step, we're never going to hit our finished product requirements. So we've got to make sure it's right, in addition to our supplier making sure it's right, but we've got to check it as well. So if there are, again, process controls that have to be met for your finished product to perform at a certain level, then yes, those process control points in general would need to be part of your quality plan. Absolutely.
Okay. The next question appears to be in regards to the quality audit. Does having the quality portion on a separate day extend the audit duration from its current length if currently only level 2 certified, and then also if already level 3 certified?
We're not exactly sure how it's going to affect it. I would expect that it will, if you look at right now, if you look at the audit duration requirements in the standard today, a level 2 facility starts at a day and a half. Level 3 facility is required to be a minimum of 2 full days. So if we talk about a level 1, let's say level 2 facility that's a day and a half, and then they have a product quality component as well, a module as well. So then maybe it would be a day and a half for food safety certification, and then 1 day for product quality. So it may be 2.5 days instead of 2 days today. So that I could see, potentially probably a half a day additional added on to a facility if they're already currently level 3. And again, it's going to depend on your certification body. It's going to depend on the type of process that you have. But in general, I would see that moving from 2 days to 2.5 days would probably be not that uncommon. And if you're currently at 2 day at level 2 and you're used to a day and a half audit, you want to add on the product quality. Again, I expect that would probably jump to 2.5 days as well. So, I would say in general, a typical SQF audit today is probably two days in facility, and I would generally, again, this is very general, but in general, I would expect that that may enhance to or expand to 2.5 days with version 8. So you may see audit time durations go from 2 days to 2.5 days with that extra additional focus on version 8 and quality. But we still haven't seen the final criteria yet. We may be able to still do everything within the 2 days. So we're going to have to kind of see how that falls out. And certainly if the activities are done together, there's going to be a lot of stuff from the quality piece that's already reviewed in the food safety piece, so it will not need to be reviewed again. So, we're still fleshing out exactly how the durations are going to be affected, but I would guess if you ask me, and if you ask my opinion, I would think we'd probably see additional 1/2 days added on to durations, again, in general.
Okay. Kind of piggybacking on that last question about, I guess, how the audits would go. Let's see here. In the new quality module is the new quality module going to lead to a separate certification, or is it listed along with the food safety portion, like for level 1 or level 2?
Yeah, it's going to be on the same certification, so you're not going to have 2. You will only have 1, but you will have the scope listed as, food safety certification, and then below it with the food sector categories and the products and processes that fall under that. And then below it, you would have product quality system certification with the food sector categories and scope and whatnot listed below that. So you'll have one certificate with basically both modules, as it were, food safety management certification and product quality management certification listed on the same certificate.
Okay. The next question states, how about if a product is pretty unique, indeed is even patented, so there are no references in the market in terms of quality parameters? Well,
then, the auditors, obviously the facility is going to have to rely on their internal data, their internal experts to determine what drives the quality. Again, they're selling it to somebody, so somebody is buying it. So there's some expectation by that buyer as to how it's supposed to perform, what's it supposed to look like, what's it supposed to taste like, what's it supposed to act like. So there will be, whether it's proprietary or not, there's still someone buying it. So what are those parameters that buyer is expecting it to have? And that will be, kind of those reference points, in addition to their internal expertise as far as what, when we define this product, how do we see it performing and what is it making it unique and what makes it be what it is. And those are going to be those parameters that drive the quality.
Okay. For products whose aspects change a lot over time, over the course of a year and seasons, for example, color, how would a company manage that? Would it be 2 quality programs for 2 different periods of the year, or options in the program for the given parameters?
I think it'll need to evolve based on the seasonality. I think the key is things can change, and I think it's okay that things change. But I think its key is defining the change to make it as objective as possible. What we want to try to avoid is leaving it in the hands of those monitors to determine is it acceptable or not without some frame of reference, without some objective measure to say, here's how you determine acceptable or unacceptable. We don't want just someone just having to make a decision without some frame of reference. So if fruits or vegetables or whatnot change throughout the year, that's fine. In the spring, these are our parameters. In the fall, these are the parameters. These are the color charts. These are the expectations. I think it's fine to set difference depending on seasonality. The key is still just making it as objective as possible during those changes.
Okay. Next question. Should we put both food safety CCPs and food quality QCPs in the same plan and call it a food safety and quality plan?
Well, you can, but again, it depends how you want to manage it. It's completely up to you, whatever's easier. But, based on that question, I would say, remember that we're not just focusing on critical quality points in our quality plan. We're going to be focusing on all process points that drive quality, not just those we designate to be critical. Again, that HACCP model gets paid, I would say ideally when you first develop a product quality plan, you should keep it separate from your food safety plan because it's very easy to get them confused. And it's very easy to think HACCP for food safety and HACCP for quality are exactly the same, and they're not. The structure can be the same, the strategy can be the same, but again, as we've talked through, in the webinar, the minimizing of CCPs and pushing things into PRPs to manage food safety is not the intent of the quality side. So if the facility is like to be confused between those two types of things and only wants to focus on CQPs, then I would say keep them separate because that's not the intention. We want to focus on all process points that drive quality, not just those that you select as a CQP. So if it's affecting the product quality parameter, if it's affecting a process control, it needs to be in the product quality plan. And if you're going to get confused between CQP and CCP, I would say keep them separate, especially at the beginning. Now, as you get more mature and everybody gets trained and everybody gets familiar and it becomes second nature, then you want to combine them, going forward, that's fine. But my recommendation would be from someone who's built their quality or who's built their HACCP plan and is evolving their HACCP plan to a food safety plan to meet FSMA, I would keep that separate from quality for a couple of reasons. Because from a regulatory standpoint, the FDA does not have access to your quality aspects of your product. Quality has nothing to do with FSMA. FSMA, the food safety plan, preventive controls, has nothing to do with quality. So unless you're comfortable handing over your product quality records and your product quality information to the FDA, I would keep them separate. Because when the FDA shows up or when regulators show up and they want to see your food safety plans, if you've got them all combined, you're going to have to show them everything. So my recommendation would be from an ease of management as well as from a regulatory perspective, I would keep them separate.
Okay. Just to let everyone know, we will have a hard stop at 1:30, so we have time for just a couple more questions. The next question I see is, we currently have a food defense plan in place, which already has a vulnerability assessment included. You mentioned that the SQF Code 8 will need a food fraud vulnerability assessment as well. Will the current food defense vulnerability assessment fulfill this requirement on the SQF Code Edition 8?
So, okay, I think the question is, we've done a food defense vulnerability assessment. Will that be sufficient for the food fraud vulnerability assessment? Was that the question?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. No, it won't, because we're looking at two different things. Food fraud vulnerability assessment is basically asking the question, within my supply chain, what ingredients that I bring in are most likely to be substituted for? what is my biggest risk of substitution, and what would be the food safety parameters or food safety aspects or consequences of that if that substitution occurred. So if I'm supposed to be getting the olive oil in and I get vegetable oil instead, what are the risks of that happening, and what are the aspects or results in my product? That is a food fraud vulnerability assessment. What if I'm getting spice mix and it's supposed to be black pepper spice and instead it's going to be cumin or something like that? What risks is that to happen for substitution, and what effect is it going to have on my product? That's a food fraud vulnerability assessment. Within my supply chain, what are my biggest risks of substitution? And if so, what are the aspects, results that affect my product? So that is completely separate from a food defense vulnerability assessment, which is similarly within my supply chain or within my facility, what, as far as intentional adulteration or, acts of, sabotage or whatnot, what are my biggest risks and what are my control parameters? Employee IDs, controlled access, tamper-resistant packaging, locking trailers. That's a food defense plan. And the vulnerability assessment is where are we at risk within our supply chain for intentional adulteration, and what controls do we have to have in place to mitigate that? So the vulnerability assessment is the same wording, but we're looking at two different aspects, within the supply chain. One is intentional substitution. One is intentional adulteration within the supply chain, as well as, more importantly, or just as importantly, within the facility. Where are we at risk from a food defense standpoint?
Okay. And unfortunately, we only have time for one more question. So if this is not your question, please be sure to take down Gary's information so you can follow up with him after this webinar is finished. But the final question, or I guess the next available one on the list, is, does the quality program and relative audits and inspections focus exclusively on the products itself, as if what matters is the final result, no matter how we obtained that result? Or does it also look at other factors such as the environment?
Well, I would say it looks at the process. Certainly, SQF is a product certification audit, so we are focused on the outcome, and the outcome is what's most important. Does that product meet the customer specification? That's at the end. For product quality, at the end of the day, that's the end of it. That's the question that has to be answered. How the facility achieves that is up to them, but it's up to them within certain parameters that are defined within the standard. And those parameters are that, there are certain process control points within the process that are going to affect the finished product. You need to identify those. You need to have some structure around those. You need to have some targets around those and monitor those to ensure that you are meeting and keeping that process within control. Again, how you achieve those and how you set those, at the end of the day, it's your plan, so that's going to be up to you. Understanding that it's the output that matters, that's absolutely true, and it's that product meeting customer specification, which is the final, really, verification tool. Has the product met your customer specification? At the end of the day, that's what matters.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Gary, and thank you to everyone who took the time out of their day to join us for this presentation. We did get some questions in the chat box related to the presentation or if this is being recorded. We do not email out the slides themselves alone. However, we have recorded the entire presentation, which obviously includes the recording of the slides, Gary's explanation, and also the Q&A. And we should have this processed and put on our YouTube channel. I'm expecting this to be up on Monday. So you will be able to access this presentation at a later date and share this with whomever you think might find it interesting. Thank you so much again for your time. Gary, thank you for your wonderful presentation. And if you guys have any other questions about this topic, you're welcome to reach out to Gary or SQFI if you need any additional clarification on anything. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.